NixOS is a declarative, reproducible, immutable operating system that uses the Linux kernel. And I've been using it for about half a year now. And something that a lot of people have a problem with or have a hard time understanding is basically how the configuration of your operating system is based on its own language, the Nix language. And specifically, something a lot of people have a hard time with is Nix flakes. And here's a flake file. And I wanted to explain what Nix flakes were and what NixOS, how it works to a non-programmer, a dummy like me. I have never programmed. Well, that's not true. So I wanted to explain how NixOS and NixFlakes works to the non-programmer, as I have very little programming history and I just wanted to use NixOS as an end user. So what does it mean to be a declarative operating system? Well, declarative operations versus imperative basically means this. In a normal Linux distribution, you might do something like sudo apt install Firefox. And then you might do that same sort of command for another program, and maybe you'll do that for another program. And so you're asking the computer to do something. It's an imperative operation. You go get food. That's basically what you're telling it. You go get food. Declarative means that somewhere it is stated the properties of the computer. So instead of saying sudo apt install Firefox, we have a file with a section that lists packages where we can put Firefox. And so whenever the computer is built, the computer just knows that it has Firefox. It is declared. This computer will have Firefox. This computer will have Spotify. This computer will have Steam. That is how the declaration works in NixOS. And you may be wondering, what's the difference in terms of usability? Why does that even matter? Well, for most people, that's because with imperative operations, they're not very easily tracked and they're very messy. They are random and you do them at certain times and you can't really retrace your steps. What this means is that you can't easily reproduce your system. With a file, if everything you have about your computer is dictated in a handful of files, even sometimes just one, you can just put that file on another computer with NixOS and build it, and you'd have the same exact computer. Now, not everyone would benefit from this. I don't even benefit from this. I have no plans of reproducing my computer, but that is really where Nix and NixOS gets its road to fame, is the reproducible part. So we've gone over declarative, reproducible. Now, what does immutable mean? Now, I'm not sure. It might be atomic, immutable. They're very similar terms. The term being is that when you're updating or building your PC, either everything works or it all fails, meaning you're not allowed to do something that basically the computer will know that will cause a irregular operation. Also means that when you do complete builds of your computer, that everything is built together. So NixOS has this really neat feature, and this is really the main reason I started using NixOS, was it's basically impossible to break. Unlike something like Arch, where I came from, where updating your computer could be fearful. You don't have no idea if the next time you update, you're gonna have some problem. You have to, everyone says, "Oh, you got to go to the Arch wiki to look at the home page to make sure there's no bugs," and I didn't like that. NixOS, the way it works is every time you update, you rebuild your entire system. It doesn't actually duplicate the programs, but you do rebuild your entire system. If anything is new, it is duplicated. If anything is old, it is same. It's a whole bunch of behind the scenes magic. But What that means is every time you log into your computer, you have a list of different generations of your computer. And each one of these generations basically is a previous version of your computer. The really big benefit to this is that if one day you update and something goes terribly wrong, you will be able to boot your computer. You just click down and you go to the previous one. It's amazing. And we would call that a rollback. And so NixOS's rollback feature is why I started using NixOS. And I learned a lot, and I've stayed for a lot of other reasons, but that was the primary reason. Was I started streaming, and I remember I updated my computer on a Friday, and I wanted to stream, that same day, and I had a whole bunch of fucking problems, and I had to do a time shift backup, and it was a mess. And so with NixOS, that has never become a problem for me. I've never had a day where I couldn't use my computer, and that's the best part for me. And back to the point of declaration, for me, having everything in a folder, a handful of files, that takes my entire computer. I know what my computer is. I know how to keep track of it. I know every single property about it. Whereas something like Arch, I feel like if you're really new and you go into it, you're just copying and pasting a bunch of commands that you have no idea what they're doing. And, it may all work out in the end, but you've lost track of your computer. You don't know what's up. And when something does break, you'll probably be really lost and you have no idea what to do because of all the spaghetti code that you put into your computer. You didn't know what you're doing, and you're not to blame for that. But I feel that imperative operation is actually pretty messy. And so having everything listed out has been really handful for me, and I like keeping things organized. So now for the part that really matters is everyone gets caught up on the part where it's a programming language, but to me, I've never even considered myself a Nix language programmer. I've just learned how to edit the files, and I'm going to teach you how this stuff works in a non-programming way with an analogy. So you don't need Nix flakes to use NixOS, but it is the new way, and it is heavily adopted, and most people do use it. And so what is a flake? So when you first install NixOS, you have a configuration.nix file. This is a file, like stated earlier, that you have everything in your computer. You have your username, your host name, the time zone, programs that are installed, things like that. And so what does a flake do? Well, when you're using NixOS, every time you want to update, you have to rebuild your system. But updating and rebuilding are actually a separate process. You can rebuild all the packages on your computer without basically calling the update server. And so what a flake does is basically a flake is right in the middle between Nix packages. Think about it as like a grocery store, like a warehouse. It's a warehouse full of software. You have the Amazon delivery driver right here, who is the flake. And then you have your house and your street, which is your configuration.nix and your home.nix. We'll go over home.nix in a little bit, but they're basically the same thing. And so that flake, which is right here, this flake file basically is instructions on where to get your software from. It's not all it does, but that's what it mainly does. And the point being is that you could give you can have the same configuration file on two computers, but if you guys are getting your software from two different stores, you're going to have a problem. And that's because Nix packages has multiple channels, meaning basically imagine you could get bananas that are a day old or 5 days old, and you get a choice. So basically, in this file, you have a section where you get to call where you want your packages to come from. So you have the unstable warehouse, which is a warehouse full of packages that are always up to date. 1 day old bananas. They're constantly ripe. They're really fresh and everything's there, but you never know what you're biting into. It's new. There might be bugs in your programs. And you have another warehouse. You have a warehouse called NixStable, which is the stable release of NixOS, where packages are all, besides security updates, are all about 6 months old. And they're dictated every 6 months. And so you have these two warehouses. And so you need to pick which one you want to get your packages from. And so your flake.nix, you get to tell your computer that, hey, I want packages from NixStable. I want packages from NixUnstable. Technically, there's more than two warehouses. There's NixMaster. And then you also have, what's cool about the flake.nix is you don't even have to get it from these warehouses. You can get it from other warehouses. You can just add and add and add. And because NixOS keeps all of its packages containerized, unlike other Linux distributions where they share similar libraries, at the cost of storage space, which really ain't much, you can have unstable and stable packages on your computer at the same time, which is by far one of my favorite features about NixOS. And so this file will tell your computer where your packages come from. On a side note, what it also does is it has a variable section. And so in this section, you can dictate certain variables about your computer. One of them being your host name. Another one being your system architecture. Basically like the way it would be saying, it's the CPU architecture of your computer. You know, what this means is that you can have this variable, say, let's say Nath. Username, Nath. And if you give this file to somebody, if you didn't have that, if you have Nath all over your files, they're going to have to manually change out Nath to, let's say, John. And so John has to delete and type Nath away 500 times. But if you just made a variable that said host equals Nath, you just type the word host everywhere. And if John wants to be John, then he just deletes the one Nath and puts John instead. And so that's where the benefit of variables come from, is basically just trying not to, it's finding spots where you could easily swap out an input value like the name Nath to John, and then also just minimize the amount of repeated code inside of your files. And then lastly, on the bottom, we have basically imagine your flake, the warehouse, and your two files, and you need to draw lines. This is where you do that. You basically say, your flake.nix will talk, say, oh, I want it to talk to this file, to my configuration.nix. Oh, I want home manager, home.nix, and it's connected to this file now because you stated it on the bottom. And then your inputs is over here. So you're basically just drawing these lines so that your computer basically is connected all around. And that's really basically all it is. There's a lot more to flakes that even I don't know. Because it's based on a programming language, it's very versatile. There's definitely a lot more that you can do than what I just said. But I should have been like here the whole time. But there's a lot more that I didn't say that there is. But at the basic level, this is really all a non-programmer needs to know. Like me, I really just wanted a stable Linux experience that had Hyperland on it, because that's really how I started. I just wanted I had native Hyperland support, which is a desktop environment, and so that's what I wanted. And I stayed for every other reason but that. I've fallen in love with NixOS, and there's so many other cool things you can do, but really this is what matters. I personally recommend, if you're going to even bother using NixOS, you learn how flakes work. It's really simple. And what's cool about it too is, besides really recently, I didn't touch my flake for like 4 months. It stays the same. You write it once basically, and unless you have some new want out of your system, that's it. That's all you need to do. And so I have my flake.nix. Personally, I use packages from NixStable, NixUnstable, and one package from NixMaster branch. And so having that choice of being able to grab packages from different, warehouses, we can call them, different channels, is really useful. You can't do that on other distributions because the packages aren't containerized. You'll have a dependency, but they call it dependency hell in Arch, where one package wants Python 2.4, this package wants Python 2.3, and you don't. It's like you can't have both, but on NixOS you can, and that's the beauty. And really, the two problems that NixOS has are unpatched binaries, and we group this with it non-FHS binaries, and then storage. And to me, storage is not a big deal. But that's, and also if you have a slow computer compiling, because NixOS compiles its files from source. But what's unlike Gen 2, you don't got to do it. It does it for you. So I'm going to try to think about, I'm probably going to cut this out. I'm going to try to think about other things I should explain. Oh, and so Home Manager. What is Home Manager? Home Manager is a module. It is a tool made by outside of the NixOS community or developer team, whatever you want to call it, that basically does everything I just said for specifically your user. So if let's say that your configuration.nix represented your neighborhood, and you get to configure the name of the neighborhood and who lives in your neighborhood. Right? You have different users. So you have, let's say, Nath, John, Michael, and Jenny. All four of these people live in the neighborhood. They're in the configuration.nix. All right? And they all have 4 separate houses. And so your configuration.nix dictates the streets, where is the fire hydrant, where are the stoplights. But you also want to dictate user by user systems. So what a home manager does is it manages your home, which on Linux, your home is your documents, pictures, that folder. But it also has a lot of things called dot files. They're called dot files because they have a dot in front of them. Your config files, your fonts, your themes, your icons, things like that. User-specific things. And so home manager, and you don't need it. If we're talking about my computer, I live in a one house neighborhood because I ain't got no one else on my computer, but it's still very useful, and it allows you to do exactly what you did to your street to your house. It allows you to say, I want pictures here. You don't have to do that, but it says like, oh, my username is this. These are the programs installed specifically to my user. So if you want programs specifically for your user and not for the whole PC, that's what Home Manager can do. I want Firefox on my user, but Jenny wants, Brave browser. And so you can separate that with Home Manager. And so Home Manager basically fully encapsulates the declarative nature of NixOS, really down to every aspect. There's other things like Disco that declaratively do partitioning. I'm not that crazy about being declarative, but I do like having everything in one folder. If you've watched my stream, you may have seen NathOS, which is I just call it Nath operating system, but it's just my folder of all my Nix files, and I have everything declared from my dot files to my home manager and my configuration, my flake. And so yeah, that's all. I just thought about, I've been doing a lot of Nix stuff personally, and I feel like it'd be cool to explain because I don't have a programming background. I programmed a little bit in middle school. I did a little bit last couple months because of all this rabbit hole that is NixOS and the Nix package manager. And so, but before that, I just, NixOS sounded so enticing to me for the stability and the flexibility. NixOS, in my personal opinion, is the best Linux experience you can have. It comes at a price. You have to learn it, and you have to want to learn it. It's not user-friendly to the common person. But if you learn your flake.nix file, if you learn your configuration.nix file, you understand the process behind the scenes, it's actually really simple. It's brain dead. Like, it's complicated in itself, but it decomplicates everything else. So once you learn how it works, it's clear. Like I understand for the most part how my computer works, and I don't have to worry about anything I don't know about. Everything I know about everything, it's in this file. It's in these few files. There's nothing that's not being tracked, unaccounted for, and it's just very, very clean. It's the closest I could say to a clean distro. When I use NixOS, I feel like I have a clean computer, and it just works. And when it doesn't work, I go to the NixOS Discord, and they love solving problems, and I've had multiple problems solved, and you learn something. And so NixOS is for the learner and someone who really wants it all. Arch has the best packages, but it's unstable. Debian has, lots of packages, but it's not as, it's much more stable, but it doesn't have the same amount, and it's all old. It's all old packages. And then Fedora is like somewhere in between, and there's other distros that do something similar to NixOS, but really, if you've watched the boilerplate video, I'm going to say what he said. Everything, everywhere, all at once. It's really that's the motto of NixOS. Everything, everywhere, all at once. And so that's about it. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something today. And have a good morning, have a good evening, have a good night. Later.